Okay, welcome everybody back to not quite our last meeting for December for the firework group. We've got in our agenda today to go through the minutes of the last meeting. We've got updates. There's also some ballot reconciliation still ongoing around AU Base. There's both the results from the block votes and we have two more issues that we need to go through and make some decisions on. Then there's an AU Core FMM review. That should say AFMM now that we have renamed that to Australian localisation. AU Core variant statement has been updated, so we can look at what that is and provide any further advice back to the AU Core editors if we want them to make any changes, and then talk about our next meeting. Now, that's the plan for the agenda today. Are there any things that we need to put on there that aren't already on that agenda? I'm not seeing any hands up at this point, so let's go forwards. In terms of the first item, approving the minutes, these weren't sent around, so I think we need to postpone those minutes to our next meeting, or postpone approving those. And I think we should take an action, Brett, as chair of the last meeting, to email those out today, please, to the group to review.
Will do. Thanks.
Okay. What we should also do is look at the actions out of the last meeting. There were quite a few. And so I just want to double check, and we've got some of the people on the line. Ruben, were you able to get to raising this issue with the firework group?
I'm afraid not. Sorry, Danielle.
Okay. And we also have some other issues. I believe that the Zulip ones have not occurred. I've not seen them on Zulip, so I think we need to take actions on those to do today. Who's happy to pop up the Zulip poll? So who wants to take that action to conduct a Zulip poll to determine if any existing implementations rely on AU Core Incana class codes?
I can do that.
Okay, thanks, Michael. And the next one, notifying people via Zulip or other forums about the potential of breaking changes in AU Core and Clowner class. I don't think we've progressed that either. That's probably important as the Connectathon is coming up. Who's happy to take that action?
I guess that's me as well.
All right. Thanks, Michael. So, Michael, if you can take those two, is that possible for this week to send those out?
Yep, I'll make it a priority.
Okay, thank you. We also have this one, which was we were going to look at where the body site extension is used across the AU-based profiles. I don't know if, Brett, you ended up having a look at that. I know your name isn't against this.
No, but you can put my name against that. I haven't looked.
Okay.
Yeah.
We might do that in the meeting if we have time, because that is one of the ballot reconciliation issues that is scheduled for this. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have the last action, which has been done from Richard to notify the PCA project on the changes for Fire 46718. Is Richard on the line?
Yes, I am. I sent a letter to Rachel, the
I'm here too.
person. Oh, there we go. Rachel said she knew about it.
I can confirm that it's been done. Yeah, no, we've been aware of this one for a while, so that's fine. One thing too, just to note for you, Richard, as well, is that I'm planning on raising this with the directory project, the HIE directory project within the agency, because at some stage they may wish to revisit the use of these extensions themselves in their project, but that's obviously something for them to consider further down the track. But yeah, that's all cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Richard. So we'll move off then the last minutes, noting they'll come out for review hopefully today, and move on to the next item in our agenda, which are updates. So I'll hand over to you, Brett, to provide updates.
Well, yeah, this will be pretty brief. You can see the last two issues for AU base that need to be resolved. I think, yeah, and then from that we're heading towards completing our reconciliation at that point for the ballot. We did run. You would have seen co-chair nominations go out some time ago and close, and I think we have an outcome on that, but the board needs to ratify that outcome, and we'll get some correspondence coming out with confirmation of the co-chair positions for next year. And just to note, there is still the HL7 International ballot running. If anyone wants to look at content and raise issues against the international standards, that would be great. And if you can indicate that to probably myself, I don't know if Ruben's doing as well. We have affiliate votes attached to the ballots, so we would be able to vote on your behalf to get that seen to in the ballot cycle for January. So yes, please do look at the material coming out and see if there's anything that's relevant to you, and that would be it.
Okay. And I think just noting for folks that the Connectathon snapshots for AU Base and AU Core have been published, and that announcement is up on Zulip, which is where all the publication announcements will be made here. So that's there, and e-requesting is coming this week. Okay. Let's move on then to ballot reconciliation. Is this something that you would like to talk to, Brett, and just direct me where you want me to click? Or would you like me to go through it?
I'll get off mute. That would be good. These were the two block votes that we reopened last time because we didn't get enough votes. Happily, by the end of the week, we did have enough votes, so I think we can just ratify the outcome on these if possible. So there's 5 and 6 from the two block votes, and I didn't see any referrals.
No, there are no referrals. These were approved.
Yeah, so I think that was just confirming those outcomes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Let's move on to the next one. So this is the 47117, and this is the one that had a couple of actions against it. We discussed this. The points of discussion, I'll just refresh for people on the line, that the item is proposed to move where the body site extension is. And let's just go to what is in AU Base now. Profile is it? Diagnostic result. Okay. So we discussed the extension and where to move it because we determined that this was appropriate. In fact, the one on imaging probably wasn't. However, what was actually raised is the fact that this element is essentially in R5 now, and instead of using the extension that is provided in the extensions pack, we could instead do a pre-adoption of the element that is available. For that, let's just go to easy results. Oh, maybe not. So it'll be R5. And the point of that extension was to provide reference off to a body structure, and that is now made available via this element in R5. And so we were debating on that. And I don't think anybody on the line had a particularly strong opinion. So the actions were taken to do two things. One, Ruben was going to have a chat to the fire management group folks to see if they had any advice to provide on whether or not pre-adopting this element or continuing with the fire for extension in the extensions pack, had advice on those choices. And we were also going to take an action to have a look at whether or not we use that extension anywhere else other than the observation profiles. So that's where we were. And based on that, I think we were going to make a decision on whether or not we want to actually swap out all instances of this body site extension to a pre-adoption of R5 approach, or whether or not we would simply just move where it is in diagnostic imaging profile to match what is shown in diagnostic result, because that is how that is represented in R5. Showing what that looks like in the profiles. Oops, went too far. Diagnostic imaging result puts that extension actually here. And that is not consistent with the path forwards in the fire standard or with the other profiles. So that was our other option, is to move this up to the top, basically, to be consistent.
I think
We
that's
don't
good.
necessarily. Yep, sorry.
I think that's a good idea, because that's consistent with body site coding and the reference being at the same level.
Yes, that would make it consistent with the R5
I've-
structure. Yep.
I've done a quick survey of our use, and we do use it in our procedure profile as well. So we have diagnostic result, diagnostic imaging result, and in
Different extension though.
no, it's the same. Oh, it is a different
it is not.
extension. I take it back. Yeah, I'll back out of that. There you go. The same but different.
Okay. Now we can
Yeah.
choose to push this to December 18 meeting. Or I think we could just make a decision now. Everything we've got in front of us is a legal approach. I guess there's two options that have been discussed. Retaining the extension, which is the extension in the extensions pack, and moving this to be actually at the root element level to be consistent with the other profile and with the modelling approach that's been taken forwards in our 5 observation. Or to move to pre-adopting the R5 element, which would still result in moving this up to root element level. What are people's opinions on either approach? Do people care? Heath?
I think we should stick with the current one. The R5 extension to me is clumsy. And I don't know how you're going to vote for this, but if you want a motion to go for the existing one move to the top, I'm happy to raise that motion.
Sounds good. I think the motion is to move, so this is AU-based diagnostic imaging result, is to move the inclusion of the body site extension to the root level.
And that's what the resolution of the ticket says, yeah.
So Heath,
Yeah.
are you suggesting that the R5 element is not as suitable for our need as the existing R4 extension?
Yeah, I'm curious about your definitions of the R5 extension is clumsy. I would like to hear more elaborations on that.
it's more the URL format is really clumsy. I can't remember exactly. I think I might have put a comment on the bottom of this. So yeah, that's the one there. So it ends up being something like fire/5.0 structure definition extension observation body structure. It's like really horrible. I know it's just a URL, but for me, it's pretty horrible.
Do we
Yeah,
really care
you-
that the URL is horrible? It's just a matter of copy and
Well,
pasting, isn't it?
Well,
maybe-
I would also say that I mean, this has been published for a while using the original extension pack version of the reference, and like I would go, why change it at this stage? Let's just use R5 when it comes. Yep.
And including the, it's by convention more so than by an actual extension pack as well, unless that's recently changed. But like from a validator perspective and people using it in reality, it's not as convenient as the existing one.
I think the clumsy naming is just a pattern that we're going to have available for the long term. And so I think the fact that it's clumsy isn't a reason to not use it. I think the idea that it's perhaps a little different and doesn't do as good a job would be overwhelming, would be saying, well, it doesn't quite do what we want. I think would be an overwhelming argument to stick with the R4 one.
I
Brett,
think
can
what I've
you-
heard from people so far is that the R5 one doesn't offer anything different. And so since there is a stable R4 known solution, that's what I'm hearing from I guess a couple of people now as the basis to retain the R4 and not complicate a pre-adoption of R5.
Yeah,
Is that right?
I'm comfortable with this argument rather than sort of the clumsiness argument.
Can someone confirm if these R5 things are actually physically published as an extension pack now?
They
they
are
weren't.
not, and they will not. That's not how it works.
Yeah, so the convention style of these extensions is a real pain in the ass. I know, I can tell you that from experience with Medi Records.
Yeah.
Because the validator doesn't basically work with it.
Yeah, there's a practical problem. Yeah. Yeah.
I will add
Okay.
that Graham is actively working on that, Keith.
In the validator?
Yes, in the validator.
Okay.
Cross
So,
version extensions is a major focus for Graham at the moment.
okay. So it will be fixed, but it's not currently supported.
So are you noting that the rest of the proposed resolution is indeed to move that element, the inclusion of that extension up to the root element. It's also to rename the extension slice from body site to body structure, which I believe is the making it more consistent with R5, so that's clearer. And then also adding a constraint to say that you have a choice between body site and body structure, making it mutually exclusive. So I guess that's pre-adopting an R5 constraint. That's what this full proposed resolution is. Ruben.
Yeah, look, I'm comfortable with that. I'm just wondering whether we should add a note or comment here to indicate that we considered pre-adopting R5's element and decided against it. But the intent is that in future versions of the spec, based on presumably R6, but whatever, we'd be seeking to move to the native element. Do we want to say something along those lines?
Yeah, I think
Just
that would be a good
to
idea.
future-proof
and-
people a bit.
Yeah, and I suggested that we include the reasons for the decision as well, so therefore we don't have to come back and debate about it.
I'm not comfortable that we make this decision for future scenarios. I think that this is perhaps a unique scenario where there's an existing extension that's been in use, potentially been in use. And if it was a case where we want to pre-adopt something in R5 and there is no pre-existing extension, then I don't think there's any argument. But where, in this case, where there is a pre-existing extension, that I think it's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I don't think that we are, from my understanding, I don't think that we are making a blanket statement. I think we are just making the statement with regarding to this particular use case. That's my understanding, unless my understanding is incorrect.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood what Ruben said, but if it is only for this particular case, that's fine.
It's
That's
only
my
for this
understanding.
case. Yeah.
Thanks.
You just get the canonical for the body side. It's floating around here. Oh, body structure reference. Body structure reference.
Quick question, Brett. The other profile that uses this, is that
It's not. Yeah, it's not.
called
Yeah,
body structure or not?
well,
Yes. Well,
yeah, Danielle pointed out it's a different extension, but it's the same problem actually.
no, there's two profiles.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
in both
Yes, correct.
AU-based diagnostic imaging result and
Yeah.
AU-based diagnostic result.
Yeah.
So yes, so that they should
Yeah,
have the same.
Change the slice. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Okay.
makes sense.
And they're the only two instances that currently.
Where one of them is already at the root and the other
Yes.
That's not,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
So we're renaming, so they're both currently called body site in two
Yes.
different places, and we're going to rename them both.
Yes.
Okay.
And this constraint, if we did it, would be to both again, because that is pre-adopting the R5 resource constraint to say that you cannot supply both of these things, just one.
And it should probably just be clear that that actually doesn't change anything on the wire. That's not a breaking change on the wire, but
Correct.
it may, if someone is using that extension in, say, fish, it will break
Yeah.
their fish definition.
Constraints.
It does the same in non-fish. Anyone downstream, if they're making assertions about a particular slice, the upstream IGs changing the slice name will break the downstream content anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ruben.
Sorry, old hand.
Oh, okay. So are we happy with the way this is worded now, or do we want to add in any more statements into the reasoning up the top?
So I'm happy to motion as per the resolution.
Okay. Heath has motioned that we accept the resolution. And do we have a seconder?
Richard?
Thank you, Richard. Richard has seconded that. Are there any questions or comments that need to be made before we move to the motion? To voting the motion, sorry.
Does
Yes?
the resolution include addition of the comment about alignment to R5 or 6 in future?
First line.
It depends. What are you proposing?
Well,
What is the
perhaps a
comment?
bit of clarity on what the spec will do when it moves to R5 or R6 in relation to this element, noting that there is a native one.
Well, that said, there is a general position, and we've done that before, that you always use the native elements, not an extension. So
Yeah, okay. Is that general position part of AU base somewhere?
it is. It'll be somewhere in the old meeting minutes before we even
Okay.
moved to the new Confluence site, but it is in there somewhere.
All right. If it's in the spec, then that's fine.
Personally,
I would
I don't think it's our business at this point in time. That's for a future time.
Yeah, I expect we would do a complete review of
Yeah.
extension use, and
Okay.
I don't disagree with you in principle, but it's just I don't think it's something we need to.
Brett, can you
Yeah.
please note in the minutes that considering moving forwards and evaluation of extension use is something that we need to add to the conventions principles project we're going to run next year, making sure that that's
cool.
documented.
Yeah, excellent.
And I
Yeah,
think that should address that.
Yeah, it should. I guess I was raising it here so that implementers of this spec can be aware that the use of this extension may go away in future if they were not aware of that.
But I think that's true of pretty much any extension, that it may go
Not
away in future.
No, not necessarily. Some will never go away, like obligation and other things.
But we know this one's going away.
Yeah.
We know this one will go away. That's the key thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess one thing is when people are looking at, say, an R4 profile and planning for the future, should we expect them to look at R5 if they want to plan for the future? And if they ignore R5, they're not planning for the future? I would have thought that was just an approach. And so you don't need to flag every item that might change in R5. If you're worried about the future, you've got to look ahead. You don't expect that guidance in the current profile.
I think that specification developers tend to be concerned with that, but maybe less so software developers or implementing a spec.
It sounds to me more like, and it's not specific just to this one, there are further instances, Ruben, that we know that things change.
Absolutely.
That I think maybe I'd like to separate out that concern from just this one specific instance.
Sure, I agree.
Yeah, and look at how we document that, and if we do, and maybe have a future page or something in AU base.
That's a great idea. If we could have a place in the spec where we list used extensions that we know have become native elements in future versions of Fire, I think that would be very helpful.
Can we also note that in the minutes, Brett?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if there's no further comments or discussions, there is a motion on the table to approve that resolution. I will launch that using the electronic poll. Please go ahead and vote. And if you are unable to use the e-vote for whatever reason, you can either pop in the chat, or you can just call out what your vote is for. All right, still a couple more people to vote. Okay, I think that might be it. So I will end that poll in 3, 2, 1. End that poll. No one has posted in the chat or stated, so I will share the results. 9 people have voted affirmative, 0 have voted negative, and 3 have voted abstain. So that motion carries. This has been approved. Thank you. All right, you know what that means? We are down to our very, very last ballot reconciliation for AU base. So let's see if we can get through that. So who wants to talk through this one?
I probably should, seeing as I reported it.
Oh, sounds great, Ruben. Tell me if you need me to click on anything.
Right, so I guess what I was getting at is there are a couple of instances of code systems in AU base which don't have any concept content. They are metadata only. In other words, they impart metadata characteristics of a particular code system without including the actual concepts of that code system. usually for licensing and IP reasons. Now, I guess I raised this because I wanted to flag that HL7 International has a resource that's specifically built for housing these sorts of things and looking after them, and that's HL7 Terminology, or THO. My suggestion was that for the few instances of these things we have in AU Base, that we rather migrate them to THO, where they can be continually maintained, and it's no longer AU Base's issue to maintain them. And that also exposes them more globally as well. So yeah, I don't think there are too many of these. I know I've flagged MIMS and PBS item codes. And so I don't think this would be a tremendously difficult change to make. It's probably more a question of timing. THO has just had a release, and the next one's probably in about 3 or 4 months, unless they do an ad hoc one, which they do from time to time. So I'm not sure why we would want to defer this one, unless these things absolutely needed to be in before the next release of THO, assuming that AU Base would be published then anyway.
I think the resolution, the proposed resolution, is essentially that this is agreed, but that the work should be done with agreements and policy through the proposed project next year to do the definition of conventions and other policy materials, so that that's actually documented and agreed to as a policy position. Do you, like, have you floated, as a question, have you floated this with the THO? Like, are they aware about AU-based content and that's something that they're interested in?
Yeah, so I'm on the leadership team for THO, and we absolutely support submissions from affiliates. The only criteria for metadata, external code system metadata records, are that they are indeed external code systems and metadata records with the information verified. And seeing as we already have one of these examples in AU Base, it'll be a fairly trivial change request to get through the TSMG, which governs THO for these things.
So we'll be publishing AU Base in January, probably.
All right. Well, that's
so I guess
too soon for THO then. In which case, that's a strong argument to defer for the next version of AU Base.
Can I ask a question too about process? Because if we say register PBS in the THO, and then it turns around that PBS is going to get published in the future,
what do you mean by published? The actual code system itself?
Yes, if PBS
potentially
publishes,
potentially that might happen.
So if it gets published as a complete code system, that's fine. It doesn't invalidate the metadata record. All the metadata record holds is typically the code system URI, the correct one to use, details about copyright and contact details and owning organization and things like that. So we already leverage these things for SNOMED and various other code systems as well.
So, okay. So like, I'm asking more questions. So how does, like, say there's a new version of SNOMED, does the metadata change as well?
No, it doesn't.
No, okay.
Well, I mean, unless something very rare happens, like SNOMED CT gets sold to HL7, then the only organization changes. But, you know, aside from true metadata things like that, these things very rarely change. THO has processes to review them every 12 months. And that's why THO is a really good home for these things, because then it kind of gets managed on an ongoing basis in a fit for purpose repository.
Okay. So effectively it will just become an external reference for us.
Yeah, that's right.
To THO. Yeah. Cool.
And look, we can progress putting this in THO in parallel. There's no reason it can't go in there while it's in AU Base, and then for future use, we can just opt to retire it in the version of AU Base post January.
Cool. Thanks.
So I can take an action to submit those requests to THO if everyone's comfortable with that.
My thought is it should be in THO before we retire it from AU Base, not just have requested that it be in THO before we retire it.
Sure, and I guess the direction we're heading in, we'll do that.
We'll actually reference it in AU base when it's in THO.
Yeah, once it's there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, once it's there. So, and then we'll deprecate the old artifact. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm okay with this, but I just find these metadata only artifacts problematic from a terminology server perspective because they're always cluttering up the actual code systems. So you have to
Yeah,
remove
look,
them and that sort of thing.
They really shouldn't be in operational terminology servers, which actually hold the content for these code systems. I agree that would make things a bit problematic. They are actually records with information about a code system rather than an operational code system for supporting things like expansions and lookup and so forth.
I guess then that's
so
just,
they're more appropriate in registries of code systems and that sort of thing.
yeah, I mean, it's just something that I suppose the people that create terminology servers need to deal with and be aware of that sort of thing, because quite often you'll get a collision, and like the version of those things doesn't match anything in reality, like the LOINC version or anything. So
I think what you're talking about, Michael, from the sounds of it, is things that have both a metadata entry and a complete code system, which is, I think, potentially a separate concern.
yeah, that's right.
So as a policy, the version of these code system records in THO are actually the date they get put in there. They don't correspond to a particular version of an instance of the actual code system. That's why they're referred to as metadata records.
In the interest of time, I'm actually hearing from everyone on the call so far that this seems reasonable, but also that we would, based on the desire to have that up and in THO before we retire from AU base, that we would move to make this considered for future use for this particular release that will be published in January.
Yep.
Okay, are you happy to make a motion, Ruben?
Yep, I move we do so.
Okay. Motion.
Oh, sorry. Could I just ask?
Yes.
Because so we have decided that it will be asked for to be added to THO.
There is an action that we're expecting documented in the minutes for Ruben to submit the request to THO to publish these items. Are there any objections to that action?
No, I think that's reasonable.
Could we put that in the resolution, please?
Yeah,
sure.
And I hope you're putting it in the minutes.
I am.
Excellent. So we have noted that how do we third person this? Requests to THO to publish metadata, or what are they called, Ruben? I can't see the issue.
Code system metadata records in AU base.
Code system metadata records.
Metadata only.
From AU base. They're all will be submitted. Okay. From AU base, you're right. For the external code systems, I believe is what we've called them in this.
That's right. External.
That are metadata only entries. Just noting that we're not expecting, like SNOMED, for example, you to do that. Or are we?
Well, SNOMED's already there.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need to do that one. And so is LOINC.
Okay. So is that, are we happy then with that, Brett?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motioner, which was Ruben, and sorry, did somebody second that? If not, can I ask someone to second, please?
Richard will second that.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any other questions or comments before we move to the vote? All right, I'll bring up the electronic poll now. So you should see that in front of you. All right, things coming in thick and fast. Over 50% of people, and now 80% have. I'm going to count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll. I'll just check the chat. Okay, I don't think anything's come in there. So I'll share those results. So 9 have voted affirmative, 0 negative, and 4 abstain. So that motion carries. We will go ahead with those actions, and we will also defer this for consideration of actioning, I guess, in the next release of AU Base. So that means we are done. This is ballot reconciliation now complete for AU Base. So well done for all of us.
Where's the party?
Yeah, well, there'll be a party in Melbourne for those people who are coming to the Connectathon. We can, you know, get some party hats or something and slap ourselves on the back. It'd be great. Okay, so next item, now that ballot reconciliation for AU Base is complete, it's also complete for AU Core, and it's very close to complete for e-requesting. There's still a few items there that they're working through, but the majority is done. We've now got on the agenda to go through the AFMM review from AU Core. We did that previously in the year where AU Core TDG had voted to endorse the draft artefacts that had gone through ballot for comment can now move to AFMM1. And now that's cycled back around for AFMM2 for artefacts that have gone through the ballot for working standard and also have achieved the testing results that reflect our agreements on AFMM2. And I really wish I'd opened that. I wonder if there's a link here. Oh, wonderful. So AFMM2, I think this reflects the wording that we endorsed earlier in the year. That AFMM2 is AFMM1, plus it's been tested and successfully supports interoperability amongst at least 3 independently developed systems with at least 80% of core data elements using appropriate data scenarios, and they're reported to and accepted by the Firework Group. So what we have is everything that is in there has already achieved AFMM1. And the testing has been conducted over a number of connectathons and testing events, some of which I've reported back to this group and is available here. Not all artifacts have met this. For most of the people on the line, I think you've been in the AU Core meetings where we've presented this. There is being captured some of the detailed coverage spreadsheets, and also looking at where items have 100%, as in of all the must support and mandatory elements for a profile, that we have 3 or more independently developed systems testing those. If you want to see which systems tested what when, that's in this profiles and extensions spreadsheet. And then we also have the actor definitions and the capability statements. So not everything has 80% or more done by 3 or more systems. There's some of the more detailed reporting down here, which is more relevant, I think, for those that don't yet have sufficient evidence to bring to this group or to be endorsed by the AU Core TDG. The plan for AU Core is to bring these to the December Connectathon and to test those out, and then come back in January when the Firework Group meets again to complete, I guess, endorsement of anything that does meet AFMM2 criteria for AU Core prior to publishing. There's also the specific elements that haven't been. So some have evidence from 2 systems, some have evidence from 1 system that goes across the profiles where we don't yet have sufficient evidence and their elements, And then for the capability statement for requester, because responder is covered, which I guess it's really interactions do we not have enough evidence from. So for example, for encounter, this would say we have evidence from 2 systems of the read interaction, and we also have it for these particular search combinations, but we need 3 independently developed systems, not 2, basically, for that content.
A question. If we look
Yes.
at on how to read this table, if we look at the row for observation, it
Yes.
says interaction read evidence from 1 system.
Down
Now,
here. Yes, there we go.
now the 2 below it, do they have evidence from 1 system or no
Yes.
system? Okay, and evidence from 2 systems applies to patient category status and to patient code date.
Yeah, that's right. That's how you read it, actually.
Yep. Good. Just checking my understanding of how to read it.
Yep. So I think we'll get a lot more evidence, though. I don't expect. So I would expect to come back in January, either myself or Dushka to come back on the profiles, but I don't expect that we will come back around AU Core Requester, which was always going to be a much more unlikely ask, given the nature of our client apps are targeted rather than the responders are generally being fulfilled by servers and EMR vendors who have really broad resource coverage. But nonetheless, I will come back to you guys in January and we'll update this on where that's at. It'll be really interesting to see how far we go with that one. Okay, so coming back, the things we do have evidence for have been looked at and endorsed from the AU Core TDG. Richard?
I have a question about the statement of AFMM2, where it refers to core elements, but in this analysis, see 80% of the core data elements, but in the analysis, that seems to have interpreted core data elements not as elements in FHIR International Core, but as elements which are must support or mandatory. Is that okay? Have we documented that interpretation anywhere?
I have documented and submitting what our interpretation for our project is. And I guess that's I believe when we discussed, and it would be in the minutes, that there's an expectation that the project defines what this means to them and has that endorsed. And the core data elements of AU Core are proposed to be those that are mandatory and must support.
Good, thank you.
I think that would be true of any downstream profile, really. Because that's essentially
likely, but
must support's kind of putting those things in scope, right? So you haven't,
It applies well to AU Core. It doesn't apply well to AU Base. So
no,
we don't have to worry about AU Base in this call. But
no,
yes,
that is true.
I agree, and I think so. Yes, I think that's a separate issue on how that definition is for a different project, including AU Base. What does that mean? It does need to be discussed when we go to approve any future AFMM2s. I totally agree with you. I think that will come up. I think that's next meeting. I think there's a couple that are going to be proposed to move from 1 to 2.
We should write that down. because it's basically stuff in the differential that you can, that you have.
But can I ask if that's considered separate to this particular agenda item to defining?
Definitely. I think it's all quite clear for what we're voting on today. It was just a wider thing that occurred to me at the moment.
Okay, so I would like to consider these two. I'm happy to consider them separately because they were considered by the AU Core TDG separately. And then make motions for these to be endorsed by the FHIR work group, that they can be AFMM2, or do people want them to be considered as a group, like both of these? I don't think it really matters, but I don't mind. Okay, let's do them separately. So this is the first one. So these are proposed. This got discussed by the AU Core Technical Design Group. It is this set of artifacts in particular. These have 100% of the mandatory and must support elements have 3 systems or greater testing them. And so that is proposed to be endorsed by the Fire Work Group as AFMM2. The AU Core Technical Design Group did vote on that on Oh, that's a good question. I don't know where that shows up in the macro, but it was on this meeting where the results of that have been approved down on. There. Okay. And so that was voted on. It's been documented in the minutes. I can't motion because I'm chair, but I would be very happy to entertain a motion to endorse this from the Fire Work Group.
I would like to endorse this, having reviewed this evidence through the previous call as well.
Thank you, Brett. Endorsing the AFMM2 decision from the AU Core TDG. Is anyone happen to second that?
Richard.
Okay, Richard, you've seconded. Are there any other comments or questions before we move to the electronic vote? Which I'm trying to find. Okay, I'm just going to pop up the vote now, relaunch the poll. There we go. So please vote for the current motion to endorse the AU Core TDG's decision that those artifacts can be marked as AFMM2. Okay, 70% of people have voted. All right, just going to count down now from 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll and I'll share the results. So we have 10 affirmative, 0 negative, 0 abstain. So the motion is passed. Those are now agreed to be AFMM2. I'll stop sharing. And then there's the next step. So those were the elements, those were the artifacts where there was 100% of the mandatory and must support we had the evidence for. The next set is where there is greater than 80%, but not 100%. So these were looked at separately. So this is still got some profiles. So that's this set here being the responder and requester, but noting that it is not the requester capability statement that is still seeking further evidence from testing out of the next December connectathon. And it also includes these profiles now. The evidence for that is also on here, and where the percentage is at, which is greater than 80%, has been reported in the tables, looked at from the AU Core TDG and approved in the last meeting. So that's now before the Fire Work Group to endorse that decision and accept these being marked as AFMM2. So are there any questions or comments on this particular JIRA? Would somebody like to make a motion?
Richard.
Okay, Richard is motioning to approve, endorse, I guess, the AFMM2. Would someone like to second?
I'll second that, Josh.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, I will now bring up the poll unless there are any other comments or questions. All right, I'll relaunch that poll now. So that's now before us. Please vote. Okay, 70% of people have voted. Just going to count that down now from 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll. Okay, and I'll share results. So 12 have voted approve, 0 negative, and 0 abstain. So those have been endorsed by this group. All right, so let's move off that topic then. And let's go to the AU Core variance statement. Now that has been updated based on changes out of the ballot and changes coming out of the process definition. Why did I go somewhere else? It's because I don't. Very cool. Okay. Does anyone want me to walk through the variance statement process or bring that up, or are we happy to just have a look at the variance statement submitted by AU Corp? All right, given that nobody's popping their hand up and asking for us to walk through it, so this is the updated statement in AU Core that now links off to with versioning to the updated process that's published on Confluence in the HL7 AU governance area. And I think that's actually the major change, noting that although this down here, because this is current build, shows current, that it would be versioned to the correct AU base or the released AU base publication in January, because AU Core is dependent on the forthcoming AU base IG. So that change will happen. Otherwise, this is what is provided for us to look at. So what that says is there is no variance from AU base, and it has the agreed text that is required to be provided for that. And then it states the additionally profiled resources, which is a recommended but not required content out of this process. Are there any comments or questions on this one? All right, so now we've cited that, which is part of the policy of citing the variance statements and any updates to those. So we've had a look at that as the firework group now with no comment. So let's move on then to the next item. So we look like we have time.
Danielle,
yes.
Could I please get us just to vote that we've cited that, just for the minutes?
To vote that we've cited it?
Yeah.
So
I just
you're
want it
asking
on the
someone to
record.
motion that they've cited and
Yeah.
someone to second that they've cited it, and then we vote that we've cited it? Okay, would you like to make that
Yes,
motion?
please. Could I move that we have reviewed
Okay, so
that?
Brett is motioning that he has cited the AU variance statement. Would someone like to second that?
I'll second Marika.
Marika, thank you. Okay, I will now pop up the electronic poll as soon as I get that working. Any other comments or questions? All right, I am now launching that. So please vote affirmative if you have indeed cited this variance statement. Very impressive that someone is abstaining, given that I have it on the screen.
Surprise.
But fair enough.
Don't
If
worry.
you want to say that you've abstained from citing it, you can. Okay.
Could be a policy
so
decision where they from their organisation.
it might be.
Ah,
So I will end the poll there and share the results. So 11 have voted affirmative, 0 negative, and 1 abstain. So that motion passes that the firework group has cited that page. Okay. So next item. Now we do have enough time, I think, to bring in. There was a request from Marika to talk about a particular item before, and I think we have room in our calendar. Well, and by room in our calendar, I actually mean room in this meeting. Sorry. Let's click on that. Okay. So this is the one. Right. So Marika, are you still online? Do you want to speak to this one?
Absolutely, Danielle. So basically we were looking for a way to represent NBS item numbers, and I was looking through the existing systems that were there, and basically they're tied, like anything existing that I could find for PBS or MBS was tied to an OID that states it's a modified value set. So all the codes are modified, so they're a consistent data length. There's a link in the notes here to a thread in chat.fire.org. So there's been a bit of discussion around like how would you go around this. Sorry, the link's dodgy. I've also clicked it, put it in the actual comments, but basically there's been a bit of discussion around like how would you go about using this, and if we wanted to use the existing codes, we would need to then pad them to be compliant, which doesn't work for our use case. And it sounded like there's been adoption of the code systems for that exist for PBS at least, where people are using the code system that is referencing padded item numbers, but not padding their item numbers. So it sounds like there is need for a code system and value set for MBS item numbers and PBS item numbers that is unpadded. And it's not something that we have. So I guess I'm proposing this will probably change considering we just voted earlier. We just voted on getting HL7 to be the ones that are publishing the system as a metadata only system. But what I was proposing is that AD base, two parts. For PBS, we remove the link to the identifier for the OID that is saying this is a padded system. And then for MBS, actually just publish a value set and code system so that they can be used.
Brett?
Any questions, concerns?
There's a couple here which go towards copyright use. There's some reasons, largely the reasons why they aren't published in AU base is because they are copyrighted and intellectual property by the Department of Health and Aged Care.
Yep.
And so we're not allowed to publish their concepts without their approval.
And we publish it as a metadata only.
Yeah, we could.
I believe we can, yes. We can't publish their codes, but I think we could. I think it would be allowed under the laws to do that one. Yes. Sorry, Brett. You're.
Yeah, just I think, and I think this is the real world hitting the fan. It's I think it's pretty typical that PBS codes aren't padded and MBS are not padded in their usage in a lot of systems. So I think the definition of what the PBS, the OID definition is too restrictive for the real world. And I think that's kind of what this ticket's getting to, is that we need to have one that's practical. But in reality, it would pan out to how would these get published anyway, if they were to be published, like they're not at the moment. Not in a file format.
Sorry, I think someone might need to go on mute.
Yeah. So I think
the OID covers what Services Australia actually work with, as opposed to what everybody else works with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, they're different worlds, but they're different theoretical worlds out there in the real world.
Yeah, and I think too, like when it does get published, what are they going to publish? Are they going to publish the padded codes? Probably.
I guess it depends upon who publishes it. If it's Services Australia, I expect they'll be the published ones. If it's somebody else, I expect they'll be the unpadded ones.
Yeah.
And it's lost in, I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I think, Marika,
we do have Department of Health and Aged Care on the line. I just want to note, Christy, if there's anything that you would be happy to take or investigate or come back on.
I can absolutely investigate, come back on anything. I will very much highlight my naivety with MBS billing codes. So perhaps if somebody could give me a really simple explanation of what I need to take back, I can definitely take it back.
Okay, good. Let's go
Yeah.
forwards with that in mind then in the discussion.
Yeah, could I just say, like, this request is really to support implementable systems, and so I think, you know, in some ways we should be, because we really want to pay attention, because the alternative is that everybody who has a system creates their own
and
method
that's
of doing
currently
this.
happening already.
Yeah.
Like if you look at
Yeah.
Shrimp, you can see that Telstra has published one for NBS, but it links explicit to like a 2020 version. So it's not usable anyway.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
And Heath? Oh, sorry.
I personally don't see why we don't use the existing one, and that we actually get some consensus on the fact that we will represent them using padded values. In the end, I understand, Marika, like having been involved in that chat, that you're concerned that you're changing data, but we, in an interoperability integration kind of scenario, we do transformation all the time. So I don't think that the transformation is too much of a problem to put some zeros at the beginning of what is in your database. So for me, I think Richard's kind of alluding to the fact that maybe some background there that he has, that this is likely to be what it's going to be there in the future. So to get interoperability between systems, including with Services Australia, I think we should be standardizing on the padded versions and using this Lloyd.
I think if someone could publish the padding rules, that would be helpful.
Yeah,
which
I don't have any information
described,
on
yeah.
the background. It's just a case of observing that Services Australia are likely to be, other people who tend to, the Services Australia are the people who control the way this stuff is used to get money. And the people who actually own the codes that Services Australia use have not yet expressed any interest in publishing the data. So,
well, yes. Okay, let's do some of the background there, because this has been a long discussion so far with Services Australia on this. That
hopefully Danielle remembers more than I do, because I've forgotten lots of it.
Yeah, the Australian Digital Health Agency has approached Services Australia on the capability and intention to publish, I guess, FHIR-enabled or machine processable-enabled forms of the code systems and value sets. And while there has been some interest from Services Australia, this hasn't moved into a place where we actually have this available. I think it has been discussed in reference with the National Clinical Terminology Service. I think that's still something that is discussed, probably something like annually between the groups. And I think that this could be another opportunity to come back to them. There really are the IP and copyright issues that we in HL7 Australia, or in fact the agency, is not allowed without permission to publish any form, whether it's padded or not padded, of that content from Services Australia without their permission. And that's one of the issues. And possibly if we solve that, as in got permission from Services Australia, that would make some of this go away, because we would have a machine processable, published and maintained set of content. Heath, your hand is up. And Michael, did you want to put your hand, were you meant to?
I can't put my hand up for some reason. I don't know why, but I just want to note that I've raised this as recently as this week with PBS, and I've got no response from them at all. Like that was like last week. I sent an email. It basically just the same that we said before. We want to publish a FHIR code system of PBS codes, etc., etc. How do we kick this off? And I've just had no response.
Thanks, Michael. Heath?
I think there's two things here. One, which is the publishing or defining of the code system. The other one is more around what is the system, and I guess the guidelines for the value that should be provided. I know they're kind of overlapping a little bit, but because of the I guess the politics or
Sorry, you mean the OID, because the code system URL is defined and actually agreed with Services Australia, thankfully.
Yeah, so that's what I'm more worried about, that we get consistency around what we use as the system. And I guess also if there is a representation rule around that it needs to be padded, then that is clearly documented when you're using that particular OID. And if we can get an agreement on that, I think we've moved a little bit further along. Because I mean, the code system's going to change. They publish new MBS codes all the time. It's more about the system and its rendering rules, for a lack of a better word, than the actual code system itself.
So where does this sit then? Does this sit with Services Australia, Department of Health, or Digital Health Agency? Because the definition and agreement that the codes must be padded and that any future publication of a complete code system would have those in them. I don't think that's something that this group can make. Ruben?
Yeah, I probably will regret saying this, but I was there when this OID was created, and I know why it's been created this way. It was to support the PCHR's inclusion of PBS codes in the prescription record and dispense record CDA document instances way back in the day. But to your question, Danielle, it's I think that really where we want to get to is whoever's the authority for the code system, and it seems as if that there's a business responsibility in the department and an implemented or maintainable responsibility in Services Australia, and I guess there's responsibility for National Digital Health in ADHA. I would suggest that the three of them need to provide an ongoing resolution to this. Because if there's any objection to whatever gets decided, it'll come from them.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, but again, we have a precedent from the PCHR or sort of that piece of work that was done.
Yep.
And I don't see why this committee couldn't basically agree that that's the approach that we're going to take, or some alternative.
I suppose it.
But
Okay.
I see it as a pretty strong argument that it's already in use in a national system, and having two ways of representing the same information for me is not a good outcome.
It's already in use. I'm not saying that we, for the PBS item numbers specifically, not saying that we deprecate that code system or anything. I'm just saying let's unlink the OID so that we can use that as a way to talk about both.
What do you mean by unlink? Exactly.
Can we remove the identifier that points to the OID?
So I think just I'll try and rephrase that for everybody. I believe what Marika is posing is that this is the real code system URL that is unpadded, but this OID is for padded, and they're actually two separate things. Is that kind of really what we're saying here, Marika?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I guess they're two separate things, and they're not really compatible in my opinion. I think if we unlinked the OID and made it clear that we will happily accept padded or unpadded, that's one way to do it. There was also discussion in the thread in chat.fire.org around like alternative representations. I think that Michael or Lee was raising that.
Yep.
Possibly. Yeah.
That's a hot topic at the moment in international.
But I'm not sure where that's sitting with international. Ruben, can you speak to that at all?
It's very heavily being debated. In fact, there's a meeting Tuesday morning for us, where we're trying to progress standardizing how we do alternative identifiers in fire code systems. The resolution to that will probably only surface in R6, so probably not soon enough for this matter.
Yeah. I guess, thanks, Ruben. I guess where I'm coming from is I have no issues with the URL that we're using to, like the URL for the system should be the URL for the system. My issue is with linking explicitly the padded identifier, because it implies that you can't use it for unpadded systems. Would also be happy if there was guidance that stated that any representation of PBS item numbers or MBS item numbers should be padded, and these are exactly the rules, but without visibility around those rules, we can't follow the rules. So yeah, I just wanting something that
So
is
can
usable.
I ask where the authoritative source for the URI sits at the moment? Is that an HL7 Australia artifact?
No, the
or an
URI
ADHA
is
artifact?
actually agreed way early on with Services Australia. There's some
And-
emails back when we were neater.
But I think there's
About
a
this.
metadata record in the NCTS for it, not so, Michael?
There only is that it comes from AU Base and nowhere else. So AU
Right.
Base was the first one to publish the FHIR metadata registry, and NCTS has loaded it. Our agency has wanted to provide a meaningful machine processable code system and value set, but has to date not gotten the agreement on what that is, and the go ahead from Services Australia. So the only thing loaded is this one.
I think the OID there sits with ADHA from
It
memory.
does, yes.
It does. Well,
Yeah.
it's in the external ARC, which is, I
Yeah.
think, 1005. So
Yes.
IP-wise, it's PBS/Human Services or whatever, Services Australia.
Yeah, so the agency, just to explain that one, registers OIDs on behalf of Services Australia. So they've done that
Yeah.
for a whole bunch of things, but the
Yep.
the authority still rests with Services Australia to essentially approve that, and they have for
And
those. Yes.
do we know if there are uses of that PBS URI in the agency's FHIR services, like the mobile interface to MyHealth record?
Richard?
Maybe. I can find out. It's
It'd
not
be very
something
good to
it's not
clarify
something.
if it.
It's not something to answer in this meeting.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
believe
input
they
to know
were.
whether people are using it in a padded or unpadded way.
I would like that.
I expect
be
Medicare are using it
investigated.
on a private channel between Medicare, between Services Australia and the agency. I don't know whether it's
So-
linked to anywhere else.
Let me clarify slightly then for people what I know, which is only a bit and not the full solution. Services Australia sends to the agency. When it was a Stu 3 gateway or Stu 2-ish, they used the OID, I believe, when they upgraded. But again, it's just what goes into the content. They upgraded to R4 and they use the proper official URL, but that's not what comes out. So what comes out, and they do send in the padded codes. What comes out is I believe the same content. So I'm pretty sure the mobile apps are still getting the OID form,
Right.
but we should confirm whether or not the mobile gateway has exposed, I guess, an upgraded version of the content from what was put in place in 2019.
So when you say the OID form, do you mean the value is in the padded form, or
So the code system URL would use the OID, not
the PBS URL?
That's right. Yes, that's what I meant. And the data I'm sure that gets sent out would also be the padded one, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I
is
think
the
the
OID.
problem
Yes.
is for implementers is that all they've got to go on is this statement, and there is no actual published set that they can say this is right or wrong, or any particular regular expression that they can apply to say that this code is incorrect.
That's not exactly true,
Absolutely.
because there is an agency defined profile for what they're actually exposing through the MyHealth record.
That's true. There is a
But
mobile
does that
gateway
have
for the
does it have any
definitions.
rules on it, on the value?
Yeah, it actually says that OID. And again, I could be wrong
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going from memory,
But-
because I actually.
No, I'm talking about the value constraint. Like, how do you know what the codes should be or what format they should be in?
Again, I'm
So
not.
no
can we
rules.
take some actions now? We're really coming down to time, and I think we want to continue this discussion. I don't think we're going to finish it today. So I think some of this, can we ask maybe Richard for you to investigate what is coming out and what the current state, I guess, is coming out of the My Health record being exposed to people?
Yes, certainly.
I think it's more
Uh,
important to know how PBS is being distributed to everyone that's using it.
Isn't that the Excel sheets? But
Yeah, what
okay.
format's that in? Because that's what people are using, right?
Would someone like to take the action to report back on that?
I don't know. BP could do that.
So what's the question? I can ask.
Oh, where do you get your PBS codes from?
So our PBS codes would be, I'm assuming, imported by BP. So the question that I'm asking them is, what form do the PBS codes? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
where do you
normally,
get
yeah,
to
no,
that action?
I know they're distributed through other formats, but yeah, yeah.
Okay. And Ruben?
So last I checked, the PBS item codes are now being distributed through an API. That used to be an XML based schedule, which definitely did not have padding. The problem came, the reason this whole padding thing started in the first place was when you're using PBS online and doing claiming through Medicare's interfaces, you're required to do padding then. And that caused part of the problem, especially when it comes from Medicare to My Health record. I think the padding was included and it impacted creation of views and all kinds of things. I think ultimately where we really want to be with this is that we actually have a FHIR code system of these things produced in collaboration with Services Australia. And it then clarifies what the acceptable codes are for doing lookups and use in data and value sets.
But if that's going to take 5 years to get to that.
Yeah. We need an interim solution, obviously, but I think ultimately that's really the goal we want.
I mean, as long as we understand what the representation rules of the values are, like if, we don't need necessarily the codes, it's just more about that format.
So should we...
The problem is there's a whole history, right? There's a whole history of this in the record. There's a medications records with a whole bunch of PBS codes that are not padded. And so can you not transport those? We either need to know how to pad them or you can't send them.
Exactly.
Yep. Yep.
For me, that's the ultimate outcome, and it will be an awesome outcome. That'll help so many
But it means you can't take
interoperability issues.
Can we either use this JIRA or some other format to post the questions we think we need answered to move forwards? And then, because I think that's what we need to discuss in the next meeting. I don't think we'll get to a final solution, but some of which, given that we've said, look, it relates to the agency, it relates to Services Australia and Department of Health, I feel a target for our next meeting is to come to an agreement on what we want and what the next actions would be in order to investigate that. Because I don't know if we have that for Christy to take away today. So are people happy to pose or put forward what they think we need to understand or discuss in this JIRA, and we can use that to guide the discussion in our next meeting? Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Excellent. We've got a yes, no nos. So let's do that. Any other final statements on this one before we move to the last item in the agenda, which are our next meetings? Okay, let's go forwards doing that. So let's talk about the next meeting plans. We do have a meeting for the 18th of December, so that's in a fortnight. And that will be post Connectathon. There are a couple of things that were proposed to be discussed in that 18th of December agenda. And we really need to confirm whether or not, I guess that's it for the agenda, noting that we're going to move discussion or continue discussion of that item also in this next meeting. So that means the agenda for the 18th of December call is to agree on when we return in January, to look at AFMM endorsement for AU base artifacts, which I think now has out of this meeting an acknowledgement that we need to consider what core data elements means in an AU base context, and to discuss the actions and questions coming out of this steer, and hopefully identify what we think needs to be done going forwards so they can go away and be actioned. Are there any other items that we need to put on to the next agenda? If there are, you can either post on the page or you can email any of the co-chairs, myself, Brett, and we will add that to that meeting. The other, I guess, thing to forecast is we'll be meeting back in January. And in January, we'll be looking to do publication approval for AU Base and AU Core. And that should typically involve going through like the QA.html and confirming that there are no warnings or errors that we aren't happy to accept, and look at the final AFMM2 endorsement for AU Core coming out of the results of Connectathon testing. We don't have anything else scheduled for the January meeting yet, but we can discuss what to add in our last one for this year. So that's it for our next set of meeting plans. Are there any other comments or questions people want to pose before we close out the meeting? All right, I'm not hearing anything. So we are on time, which is fantastic. Thank you everyone for your discussions, and congratulations to us all for completing AU-based ballot reconciliation. Go us.
Well done, folks.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.